Have you ever walked outside your own front door, coffee in hand, expecting a quiet morning, only to find something so absurd that you actually question if you're still dreaming? That's exactly how my Saturday began. The sun was just coming up, the air smelled like freshly cut grass, and I was looking forward to a peaceful day working on my property. But instead, I stepped into the kind of scene you'd expect in a movie about dystopian neighborhoods or small-town corruption. Right there, on the road that runs past my land, was a barricade. Not a construction barricade. Not law enforcement. No, this was something different, something ridiculous. Orange cones were spread across the pavement like it was some kind of military checkpoint. A folding table sat right in the middle of the lane, and a couple of my neighbors, dressed in neon safety vests, were standing like sentries, waving down cars. And then I saw her, Karen, arms crossed, sunglasses perched dramatically on her nose, lips pursed like she was commanding an army. She stood proudly behind that table like a queen addressing her subjects. And the craziest part? Drivers weren't just stopping. They were paying, handing over cash, shaking their heads, and then being waved through like they just cleared customs at the border. At first, I literally thought maybe there was a charity drive or a community event. You know, bake sale money, kids' sports fundraiser, something like that. But no. When I walked closer and overheard the exchange, my jaw nearly hit the gravel. Karen was demanding a road maintenance toll. $10 to pass. If you didn't cough it up, she'd wave you to the side, making you sit there while others handed over cash. She acted like she owned the road, like she had the legal right to tax anyone who drove past. Here's the kicker. That road? It's not HOA property. It's a county road. My land isn't even part of their HOA, and yet somehow, she thought she could drag the rules of her little fiefdom over to my driveway. It felt like stepping into the Twilight Zone. I actually laughed at first, thinking maybe it was a prank, some kind of early April Fool's stunt. But as I stood there, I realized it wasn't funny. She was serious. Dead serious. Cars were starting to back up. A delivery driver looked confused and annoyed, checking his watch. An elderly neighbor rolled down her window, digging through her purse for bills, muttering under her breath about how ridiculous it was. And the whole time, Karen barked at people like she was on duty. Toll is $10 cash only. HOA rules. No exceptions. That's when my blood started boiling. See, I've had run-ins with Karen before. She's the type who thinks every decision in the neighborhood needs her stamp of approval, even if she has no authority over it. She once tried to tell me what color I should paint my barn, even though again my property isn't part of her HOA. I shut that down real quick. But this was a new level of crazy. Setting up a guarded checkpoint at the edge of my land? Demanding toll money from strangers? That wasn't just annoying, it was illegal. I walked down my driveway, coffee still in hand, and called out, "Hey, Karen, what's going on here?" She turned slowly, like a villain in a movie who knows they're about to deliver a dramatic line. "Road maintenance toll," she said flatly. "HOA decision. Everyone contributes. No freeloaders." I couldn't help but laugh. "Karen, this isn't HOA property. And newsflash, I'm not in your HOA. You have no right to block this road," she smirked. "This road leads into our community. Therefore, it falls under our protection. You live next to us, you benefit from our rules. Everyone pays their share." I almost spit out my coffee. Benefit from her rules? Are you kidding me? I don't use their playground, their pool, their mailboxes. I don't attend their silly meetings where they argue about what kind of flowers people can plant. I own my land outright, and the road is maintained by the county, not their little committee. But in her mind, proximity was enough to give her authority. As I stood there arguing with her, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. Karen thrived on telling people what they could and couldn't do. She thrived on the illusion of power. And now, she had manufactured a situation where she could literally stop traffic, collect cash, and play sheriff. I glanced around and noticed some neighbors watching nervously from their porches. Nobody wanted to get on Karen's bad side. She was the kind of person who would nitpick your lawn, report you for violations, or make your life miserable with endless complaints. People were scared of her. And that fear gave her leverage, but I wasn't about to back down. Not this time. Because if she could get away with turning my driveway into a toll booth, what was next? Charging me for sunlight that crossed her property line? A fee for using the view of the trees? No way. I set my coffee down on the hood of my truck, walked up to the table, and stared her straight in the eye. Karen, take down the cones. Move the table. And stop demanding money from people. You don't have the authority to do this. Her smile widened, like she'd been waiting for me to challenge her. If you don't like it, she said, call the cops. But until then, nobody passes without paying. That's when I realized this was going to turn into a fight one way or another. And as the line of cars stretched longer behind me, horns honking in frustration, I knew I had a choice. Walk away and let her pretend she ruled the road. Or stand my ground and show everyone that Karen's power trip had finally gone too far. If you've ever dealt with someone like Karen, you know one thing. Logic doesn't work. Facts don't matter. The law? She bends it to whatever fits her argument in the moment. So when I told her she had no authority to set up a checkpoint on a county road, I already knew her answer wasn't going to be reasonable. Still, I didn't expect her to double down so hard, right there in front of an audience. Karen, I said, trying to keep my voice calm but firm, you can't do this. This road doesn't belong to your HOA, and I don't owe you or anyone else. Here a single dime. She leaned forward across her little folding table, her sunglasses sliding down her nose just enough to show her eyes burning with smug determination. Wrong, she snapped. Every car that drives down this road uses our streets, our landscaping, our infrastructure. And if you're not paying your fair share, you're freeloading. And freeloaders, she said, raising her voice so the line of cars could hear, don't get a free pass. Her volunteers, two middle-aged men, I barely recognized, shifted uncomfortably in their neon vests. I could tell they weren't entirely on board with this stunt, but they weren't about to cross Karen. She had that kind of grip on the HOA, the type where people go along just to avoid becoming her next target. A delivery driver rolled down his window and shouted, "Hey, can we hurry this up? I've got stops to make." Karen didn't even flinch. She raised her hand like a traffic cop and barked, "Toll is $10, sir." HOA rules. The driver groaned, slapped a crumpled bill into her hand, and she waved him through. The next car followed suit. The line moved slowly, each transaction feeding her ego. It was like watching a queen collect tribute from her subjects, and every dollar that passed into her hand made her stand a little taller, her smirk a little wider. I felt my blood pressure spike. Not just because she was blocking access, but because she was getting away with it. People were paying her. My neighbor's folks who should have known better were enabling her delusion. And the longer this went on, the more legit it looked. Like the HOA had real authority to run a checkpoint on public land. I stepped closer, planting myself between Karen and the next car in line. "Listen," I said, pointing to the cones. "You're trespassing. You're obstructing a public roadway. That's against the law. If you don't pack this circus up right now, I'll call the sheriff." Her smile didn't budge. "Go ahead," she said sweetly. "Call them. When they get here, I'll explain that you're the one causing a disturbance. You're the one interfering with community safety. You think they'll take your word over mine?" I'm the HOA president. I represent this neighborhood. You're just some outsider who doesn't want to pay your dues. That last line hit me like a punch in the gut. Outsider. She said it with venom. Like I was an invader instead of a landowner who'd been here long before her HOA even existed. My family had worked this land for decades. I paid taxes that actually funded the county. As the deputy moved the last cone off the road, the line of cars finally began to move. Drivers waved at me, some thanking me for standing up. For the first time all morning, I felt like maybe this nightmare was over. But deep down, I knew better. People like Karen don't just fold and disappear. No, this was only the opening round. And something told me she wasn't finished with me yet. When the sheriff's SUV pulled away and the last of the backed-up cars disappeared down the road, I thought maybe, just maybe, that was the end of it. Karen had been embarrassed in front of half the neighborhood. She'd been told, flat out, that she had no authority. The smart move would have been to retreat, lick her wounds, and move on with life, but Karen was not the type to retreat. For her, embarrassment wasn't a reason to back down, it was fuel. And I didn't have to wait long to see just how far she was willing to go. The very next morning, I noticed something unusual in my mailbox. Not the usual stack of bills and junk flyers, but a thick envelope with the HOA's letterhead printed boldly at the top. My stomach sank. I already knew it wasn't going to be good news. I ripped it open and sure enough, it was a notice of violation. In fact, it was 3 violations, each typed out with legal-sounding jargon designed to intimidate. Unauthorized. Structure. They claimed my barn, yes. The barn that had been standing since my grandfather's time was an unapproved structure not in compliance with HOA design standards. Excessive noise. Apparently my tractor, which I use for routine property maintenance, was classified as a noise disturbance. Failure to maintain landscaping. This one really made me laugh. I was being cited for unkempt grass along my property line, even though my yard was trimmed and neat. At the bottom of the letter, bold and underlined, it read, "Failure to correct these violations within 14 days may result in fines of up to $200 per day, plus legal action by the HOA. I sat at my kitchen table, letter spread out in front of me, and shook my head in disbelief. They had no jurisdiction over me. None. My property was not, and never had been, part of their HOA. But Karen didn't care about facts. She cared about intimidation. She wanted me to waste time, money, and energy fighting bogus claims until I caved. I knew what this was, retaliation. I'd embarrassed her, and now she wanted payback. Later that afternoon, as I was hauling supplies across the yard, I saw her SUV creeping past my property line. The window rolled down, and there she was, Karen, smirking like the cat that ate the canary. She slowed just enough to call out, "You'll regret making me look bad." Then she sped off before I could even respond. That was all the confirmation I needed. She wasn't done. Over the next few days, things escalated. First came the complaints. A county inspector showed up, saying someone had filed an anonymous report that I was dumping hazardous waste on my land. Of course, it wasn't true, and the inspector left shaking his head. But the message was clear. Karen was going to weaponize every agency she could think of. Then came the calls. I started getting voicemails from a number I didn't recognize. Each one was from a so-called HOA legal representative, threatening fines, liens, and even foreclosure if I didn't comply with their demands. When I called the number back, it turned out to be a generic answering service. Probably one of Karen's friends playing lawyer on a prepaid phone. And just when I thought she couldn't stoop any lower, I found a "Vote to Remove Problem Neighbor" flyer taped to the stop sign near the corner. It had my address printed. On it, with bold red letters accusing me of being a danger to the community. It claimed I was reckless, disrespectful, and unwilling to cooperate with community safety standards. The kicker? The flyer urged neighbors to report all suspicious activity at my property to the HOA board, aka Karen herself. At first, I laughed. It was so over the top, so desperate, it almost felt like a parody. But the more I thought about it, the more it worried me. If even a handful of neighbors bought into her lies, I'd suddenly be living in a fishbowl, every move I made reported, twisted, and used against me. That night, sitting on my porch with the crickets chirping and the stars overhead, I asked myself a hard question. Was this worth the fight? I could ignore her. I could let her burn herself out. Or I could push back hard and risk turning this into a full-blown war. Part of me wanted peace. I had better things to do with my time than deal with Karen's power trips. But another part of me, the part that had watched her block a county road and shake down my neighbors for cash, knew she wouldn't stop unless someone stood up to her. The sheriff had embarrassed her once. Now it was my turn to finish the job. I started doing my homework. That night, I pulled out property records, county codes, and everything I could find online about HOA authority or, in my case, their lack of authority. I wanted ammunition, the kind that couldn't be twisted or denied. And the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Karen's whole campaign was built on sand. She couldn't enforce rules on non-member properties. She couldn't issue fines, she couldn't slap liens, and she definitely couldn't invent authority she didn't have. But here's the thing about bullies like Karen. They don't back down just because you have the law on your side. They back down when you use the law against them. The next day I made a few calls of my own to a county commissioner I knew, personally, to the sheriff's office again, and finally to a local attorney who specialized in property rights. By the time I was done, I had a plan. Because if Karen wanted a war, I was ready to give her one dot. By the time I sat down with the attorney, I was already fed up. I'd spent a week watching Karen strut around like she was the sheriff of the county, filing bogus complaints, sending fake violation notices, and whispering poison into the ears of neighbors who just wanted to be left alone. Enough was enough. The attorney's name was Mark Jensen, a sharp, no-nonsense guy who'd spent 20 years fighting a HOA overreach. When I laid out everything Karen had been doing, the checkpoint, the bogus violation letters, the phony legal threats, he leaned back in his chair, let out a low whistle, and said, "She picked the wrong guy to mess with." That was the first time I'd smiled in days. Maintenance on that road. Meanwhile, Karen moved in a few years ago and suddenly decided she was queen of everything she could see. I turned toward the growing line of cars. "You all know this is wrong," I called out. "This road is county maintained. Karen has no legal authority to charge you anything. You're basically handing her money for nothing." A few drivers looked guilty, glancing at each other. One man muttered, "I knew this didn't sound right." Another shook his head and said, "But if we don't pay, she won't let us through." Fear. That's what kept them in line. Not respect for Karen's authority, but fear of her retaliation. Karen pounced on the hesitation. "Don't listen to him." She snapped, pointing at me like I was some trespasser. "He's been a problem since day one. Always fighting the HOA, always refusing to cooperate. He doesn't care about our community. He just wants to take advantage of the rest of us." That's when I realized her little performance wasn't just about collecting tolls. It was propaganda. She was using this checkpoint as a stage to turn the community against me, painting me as the villain in front of an audience that didn't want to be caught in the middle. If she could convince them I was the problem, then her nonsense suddenly looked like leadership instead of lunacy. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to shout. Losing my cool would only give her ammunition. "Karen," I said slowly, "this is your last chance. Take the cones down. Move the table. Let these people through. If you don't, I will call." The sheriff, and when they get here, you'll be the one explaining why you're extorting your neighbors." For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face, but it lasted only a second. She snapped her fingers at her volunteers and said, "Hold the line. Nobody moves unless they pay." "We're not backing down." One of the men in the vest shifted uneasily. "Karen, maybe we should." She cut him off with a glare sharp enough to slice steel. "Do your job?" she hissed. He swallowed hard and went back to waving down cars. That's when I knew she wasn't going to back off. Not voluntarily. She was too deep into the performance, too committed to her role as protector of the community, and if I wanted this circus shut down, I'd have to escalate. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the sheriff's office number, and hit call. Karen's smile faltered for the first time. She leaned across the table, her voice low and venomous. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. "The HOA always wins." I didn't flinch. "We'll see about that." As the phone rang in my ear, I realized this was only the beginning. Karen had turned my driveway into a battlefield, and I had no choice but to fight back because if I let her win here, she'd never stop. The phone only rang twice before the dispatcher picked up. I gave them the basics: unauthorized roadblock, people being stopped and charged money, possible trespassing. The dispatcher didn't ask many questions, just said an officer would be sent out right away. That told me everything I needed to know. They'd heard of this kind of nonsense before. When I ended the call, Karen was glaring at me like I'd just committed treason. Her volunteers looked like they wanted to melt into the asphalt. A couple of drivers in line perked up, whispering to each other. Finally, someone was pushing back. "Sheriff's on the way," I announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "So if you want to avoid explaining yourself to law enforcement, now's your chance to clear this mess up." Karen crossed her arms and scoffed. "Oh, please. When they get here, they'll take one look at this and side with me. I'm the HOA president. We're maintaining order, protecting the neighborhood. You think they'll believe some cranky landowner who refuses to cooperate?" I didn't even answer. The more she talked, the more obvious it became that this wasn't about the road or money. It was about her ego. She needed to be in charge. She needed everyone to bend to her will. And now that she had an audience, there was no way she was going to admit she was wrong. The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Cars idled. Drivers shifted in their seats. Some handed over cash just to get moving again. Others parked off to the side, unwilling to feed Karen's toll booth scam but too nervous to confront her. I stood there, arms folded, silently daring her to keep it up until the sheriff arrived. Finally, the sound of tires crunching gravel echoed down the road. A county sheriff's UV rolled up, lights flashing. Relief swept through me. At last, someone with real authority was here. The line of cars parted, drivers leaning out their windows, pointing at Karen's makeshift checkpoint. Karen, to her credit, didn't flinch. She straightened her sunglasses, smoothed her blouse, and plastered on a smile like she was about to give a press conference. When the deputy stepped out, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense expression, Karen strutted forward like she was greeting an old friend. "Deputy, thank goodness you're here," she said, her voice dripping with false relief. "We've had a terrible problem with freeloaders using our roads without contributing to maintenance. The HOA voted to establish this checkpoint to ensure fairness and safety. I'm so glad you can help enforce our rules." I nearly choked on my own laughter. The audacity! She was trying to spin the story before the deputy even knew what was happening. The deputy raised an eyebrow, glancing at the cones, the table, the line of irritated drivers. Then his eyes landed on me. "Sir, you the one who called this in?" "Yes, sir," I said, stepping forward. "This is my property line. That road is county maintained. I'm not part of their HOA. She's out here blocking traffic. demanding cash from drivers and claiming she has the authority to do it. She doesn't. This is trespassing and extortion. Karen gasped like I'd insulted royalty. Extortion? How dare you? We are collecting contributions for community safety. Every dime goes to neighborhood improvements. The deputy didn't look convinced. He pulled a small notebook from his vest and started jotting things down. Ma'am, do you have a permit for this checkpoint? Authorization from the county? Karen blinked. Permit? Why would we need a permit? We're the HOA. We govern this neighborhood. Ma'am, the deputy said flatly, an HOA does not have the authority to set up traffic stops on public roads. That requires approval from the county and, in most cases, law enforcement presence. Do you have either of those? Karen stammered, her confident facade cracking. Well, no, but this road leads into our community. That means it falls under our jurisdiction. The deputy closed his notebook. No, ma'am. Public roads fall under county jurisdiction, which means you're currently obstructing traffic and collecting money without authorization. That's illegal, the crowd of drivers murmured. Some even clapped quietly. Karen's face turned beet red. She glanced back at her volunteers, but they were already peeling off their vests, muttering excuses as they backed away. I couldn't help but smile. Finally, the law was putting her in her place, but Karen wasn't done. Oh no! She slammed her hands on the folding table and shouted, This is harassment. We have rights. I demand to speak to your supervisor. The deputy sighed, clearly used to dealing with this type. Ma'am, I am the supervisor on duty today. And I'm telling you, right now, pack this up. Cones, table, everything. Or I'll have no choice but to cite you for obstruction and possibly take you in. Her jaw dropped. You wouldn't dare. Try me, the deputy said, his voice like steel. The silence that followed was delicious. Karen looked around, expecting support, but the drivers who had once reluctantly handed her cash were now glaring at her with open hostility. Even the neighbors on their porches had stepped closer, phones out, recording every second. With her audience turning against her and the deputy standing firm, Karen finally cracked. She threw up her hands dramatically and shouted, Fine. But don't come crying to me when the roads fall apart and your property values plummet. She kicked over one of her cones, folded her table in a huff, and stormed off toward her SUV. The deputy watched her go, then turned to me. Sorry you had to deal with that, sir. We'll file a report, and if she tries something like this again, we'll escalate it. Appreciate it, I said, relief flooding through me. Mark explained the law in plain English. An HOA's authority ends at its property line. They can't extend their rules to land that's not deeded into their covenants. Your property is independent. Period. Every citation, every fine, every threat, they're all meaningless. They're just scare tactics. And if she keeps it up, we'll hit her with harassment and abuse of process. He drafted a letter that same afternoon. It wasn't just a warning, it was a shot across the bow. The letter spelled out, in black and white, that Karen and her HOA had zero jurisdiction over my land. It demanded that all so-called violation notices be withdrawn immediately, and that further attempts to harass or intimidate me would result in legal action. I sent the letter via certified mail, addressed directly to Karen as HOA president. I wanted that green slip with her signature on it. I wanted proof she'd been put on notice. For a couple of days, things went quiet. No inspectors showing up. No mystery phone calls. No new flyers smearing my name. I almost let myself believe it was over. Then the storm hit. On the third day, I woke up to find half a dozen HOA board members standing at the edge of my driveway. Karen was at the front, holding my lawyer's letter in one hand like it was a piece of trash he couldn't wait to burn. Behind her, the board looked nervous but obedient like soldiers marching into a battle they didn't believe in but couldn't refuse. I walked out, coffee mug in hand, and said, "You're trespassing. State your business or leave." Karen waved the letter in the air. This means nothing. You can hire all the lawyers you want, but this community has spoken. You live next to us, you benefit from our amenities, and you will comply with our rules whether you like it or not. I laughed out loud. You can't be serious. That's not how the law works, she smirked. Maybe not, but you think the county cares? You think they're going to waste time sorting out legal boundaries while you rack up complaint after complaint? No, they'll get tired of you. They'll side with the HOA because we're organized. And you? You'll be buried in red tape until you give up. It was pure Karen, arrogant, confident, convinced she was untouchable. But the board members behind her weren't so sure. One of them, a woman named Sheila, spoke up hesitantly. Karen, maybe we should, back off. If the letter says, Karen spun on her. Quiet, she snapped. Do you want your lawn violations dragged out in the next meeting? Do you want me to bring up your overdue dues? Sheila clammed up instantly, eyes downcast. The others shifted uncomfortably. That's when it hit me. Karen didn't just use rules. She used fear. She kept the board in line the same way she tried to keep the neighborhood in line by holding power over them, twisting the rules until they served her. I took a step closer. Karen, this is harassment. It's illegal. And if you don't back down, the next letter won't be from my lawyer. It'll be from a judge. Her smile faltered just a bit, but she recovered fast. We'll see. Because tomorrow night, the board is voting on a resolution to extend HOA enforcement to all properties adjoining the neighborhood. That includes yours. And when it passes, you'll have no choice but to comply. I blinked. That's not even possible. You can't just vote your way into controlling land you don't own, she shrugged. Watch us. With that, she turned on her heel, her little army following behind. They marched back to their SUVs, leaving me standing in the driveway, stunned. It was madness. Absolute madness. But Karen wasn't bluffing. She was really going to try and rewrite reality through an HOA vote as if laws and deeds meant nothing. And if I let her get away with it, even symbolically, it would only embolden her more. That night, I called Mark again. He chuckled when I told him about the vote. Let her try, he said. It'll be like voting the moon belongs to the HOA. Doesn't make it true. Yeah, I said. But if she convinces the neighbors, I'll be living under a microscope. I'll be harassed nonstop. Then we don't just play defense, Mark replied. We go on the offensive. You've been patient. Now it's time to hit her where it hurts. I asked what he meant, and he laid it out in detail. Civil harassment suits. Complaints filed with the county about misuse of HOA funds. A demand for an independent audit of their finances. Sunshine laws that required HOA meetings to be open to the public, meaning I could show up, record everything, and shine a spotlight on her antics. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I had the upper hand. Karen thought she could bury me in red tape. But two could play that game. The next evening, I parked just outside the community clubhouse, where the board was gathering for their special vote. I carried my phone, fully charged, camera ready. When I walked in, every head turned. Karen's eyes narrowed into slits. Well, she sneered. Look who decided to join us. The outsider, I smiled and hit record. Don't mind me. Just here to observe. Sunshine laws, right? Open meeting? Her face flushed with anger, but she couldn't say no without breaking her own rules. The board members fidgeted nervously as I took a seat in the back. Karen cleared her throat. and launched into her speech about protecting community values and holding outsiders accountable. But I wasn't listening to the words. I was watching the faces in the room, the unease, the doubt, the realization that Karen's crusade was going too far. And as the meeting dragged on, I realized something important. Karen wasn't as untouchable as she thought. All it would take was one crack in her armor, one slip, and her whole empire could come crashing down. The community clubhouse was buzzing when I walked in. Folding chairs lined up in rows, neighbors whispering in little clusters, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. You'd think it was some kind of political rally, not a neighborhood meeting. But then again, Karen had a way of turning even the most boring HOA gathering into a full-blown circus. At the front of the room, Karen stood like a general before her troops. Clipboard in hand, pearls at her neck, a smug grin plastered across her face. Behind her sat the HOA board, 5 tired-looking neighbors who probably wanted to be anywhere else but had been guilt-tripped into serving. As I slipped into the back row, I hit record on my phone again. A couple of people noticed, and I saw their eyes widen. Karen noticed too. She stiffened but didn't say a word. She couldn't. These meetings were required by state law to be open, and recording them was perfectly legal. Karen cleared her throat dramatically, the way a teacher does to quiet down a noisy classroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "tonight we make history." The room went silent. I swear you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. "For too long, outsiders have taken advantage of our community," she continued. "They drive through our streets, use our access roads, enjoy the safety and cleanliness we work so hard to maintain, yet they contribute nothing. They disrespect our rules, mock our authority, and bring down our property values." I could feel her gaze drilling into me from across the room. She didn't say my name, but everyone knew exactly who she meant. That ends tonight. With this resolution, we, the rightful members of this HOA, will extend our protective authority to properties adjoining our community. That includes enforcement, dues, and penalties. Everyone benefits, and everyone pays their fair share. That's only just. She raised her clipboard like it was some kind of holy scripture. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others frowning. That's when I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough to cut through the whispers. "This whole thing is a joke. You can't vote your way into controlling land you don't own. That's not just illegal, it's laughable." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "Sit down," she hissed. "No," I said, steadying my voice. "Every single person here deserves to know the truth. This resolution? It has no legal weight. None. You can pass it, cheer for it, frame it on the wall. It won't change a thing. My property is not part of this HOA, and it never will be." The board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, Sheila, the same woman Karen had silenced in my driveway, looked down at her notes. Clearly torn. Karen slammed her clipboard on the table. "This is exactly why we need this vote. Outsiders like you think you can just walk all over us. Well, not anymore." Her voice cracked at the end, more shrill and commanding. For the first time, I saw her losing her grip. From the middle rows, a man raised his hand. His name was Tom, a longtime resident who usually kept quiet. "Karen," he said slowly, "is this even legal? I mean, can we actually do this?" Karen didn't miss a beat. "Of course it's legal. We are a governing body. Our rules have authority," I cut in. "No, they don't." I brought proof. I held up a folder marked my attorney had prepared for me. State statutes, case law, and a letter from my lawyer. HOAs cannot extend jurisdiction beyond their boundaries. Period. What she's proposing is nothing but theater. I handed copies to a few neighbors sitting nearby. They started flipping through the pages, eyebrows rising. Karen's face flushed beet red. Don't listen to him. He's twisting the facts. He's trying to divide us. But it was too late. Doubt had seeped in. People were whispering, some shaking their heads. The illusion of Karen's absolute control was cracking right in front of her. The board chair, an older man named Robert, finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. Karen, maybe we should table this. If there's even a question of legality, Karen snapped around. No, we vote tonight. Robert sighed. All right. All in favor? Only two hesitant hands went up Karen's and one loyal ally sitting beside her. The other three board members kept their hands down. The room went still. Karen's jaw dropped. What are you doing? She demanded that Sheila finally raised her head. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. Karen, this isn't right. You've gone too far. We joined the board to keep the neighborhood running, not to wage war on people who don't even live under our bylaws. I won't be part of this. The other two board members nodded. Karen looked like she might explode. Her fists clenched, her face redder than I'd ever seen it. Traitors! She screamed. You're all traitors. Do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed this community. But no one was listening anymore. People were standing up, leaving the room, shaking their heads in disgust. Tom gave me a little nod as he walked past. I stayed seated, phone still recording, capturing every second of Karen's meltdown. When the room was nearly empty, Karen whirled on me. This isn't over, she spat. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll find another way. You'll see. I just smiled. Go ahead, Karen. Keep digging. You'll only bury yourself deeper. And with that, I walked out of the clubhouse into the cool night air, my phone buzzing with messages from neighbors already thanking me for standing up. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, Karen's power had cracked. And everyone had seen it happen. When Karen stormed out of that clubhouse, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally back down. The vote had failed, the board had turned against her, and half the neighborhood had seen her unravel in real time. It felt like the end of her crusade, but I should have known better. Karen didn't see the failed vote as a defeat. She saw it as a personal betrayal. And if there's one thing Karen doesn't tolerate, it's losing control. The very next morning, I woke up to the sound of hammering. I looked out my window, and there she was standing at the end of my driveway, supervising a crew of men in neon vests. They were pounding posts into the ground and stringing up a chain-link fence. I stormed outside. What the hell is this? Karen turned, smiling like a cat that had just caught a mouse. Community security enhancement, she said sweetly. The board authorized it. I barked out a laugh. The board voted against you last night, she smirked. Oh, this isn't about the vote. This is about safety. We're creating a security perimeter to prevent unauthorized access. Unfortunately, your driveway falls right on the perimeter line. Nothing personal. I nearly lost it. You can't block my driveway. That's trespassing. She shrugged. Take it up with the county. Until then, this fence stays. I whipped out my phone and started filming. The workers immediately froze when they realized they were on camera. You know you're trespassing on private property, right? I said loudly, making sure every word was recorded. One of the men looked nervous. Ma'am, are you sure this is authorized? Karen snapped. Keep working. Don't listen to him. But the damage was done. Within minutes, the crew packed up their tools and left, muttering under their breath. Karen was left standing there alone, fuming. You'll regret this, she hissed. That was just day one. Day two. Anonymous complaints started pouring into the county code office, claims that I had illegal structures on my property, that my septic system was leaking, that my well water was contaminated. None of it was true, of course, but inspectors were obligated to check. I had to waste an entire afternoon walking them around, showing them everything was up to code. They left shaking their heads, muttering about busybody neighbors. Day 3, my mailbox was stuffed with flyers. "Unneighborly outsider," the headline screamed. Beneath it was a grainy photo of me taken from God knows where next to paragraphs of lies, that I'd refused to pay dues, that I was threatening residents, that I was bringing down property values. I stood in my driveway holding one of the flyers, my hands trembling with rage. Karen had gone from nuisance to full-blown smear campaign. That evening, I spotted her marching down the street, clipboard in hand, going door to door like a politician on election day. I could hear snippets of her pitch as I followed at a distance. Dangerous precedent. Outsiders can't just ignore the rules. If we don't enforce boundaries, our community will collapse. Some neighbors nodded politely. Others looked skeptical. A few shut their doors in her face. But she didn't care. She was relentless. I finally confronted her halfway down the block. "You're lying to people," I said. She spun around, eyes blazing. "I'm protecting this neighborhood from you." I couldn't help but laugh. Protecting them from what? My mowed lawn? My clean driveway? My quiet evenings? You're inventing a war that doesn't exist. Karen leaned in close, her voice low and venomous. "You embarrassed me. You turned people against me. And I don't forgive. I will make your life so miserable, you'll beg to join the HOA just to make it stop." I looked her dead in the eyes. "Karen, you just confessed to harassment. And guess what? You're on camera." Her face drained of color as I held up my phone, still recording. She stammered, searching for words, before storming off again. But she wasn't finished. On day 4, I came home to find a bright yellow notice of violation duct taped to my front door. It looked official at first glance. HOA letterhead, bold font, threatening language about fines and liens. But at the bottom, in tiny print, was the kicker. Issued by authority of the HOA Compliance Office. There was no such thing. It was a fake department Karen had invented. I called Mark, my lawyer, and he laughed so hard he nearly dropped the phone. "She's forging documents now? Perfect. That's fraud. We'll bury her with this." But while he was thrilled, I was exhausted. Every day was another stunt, another fight, another fire to put out. I couldn't relax, couldn't enjoy my own home. That's exactly what she wanted. On day 5, Karen escalated again. I pulled into my driveway to find a car parked sideways, blocking the entrance. Sitting behind the wheel was Karen herself, arms crossed, sunglasses on, smirking at me like a queen on her throne. I rolled down my window. "Move your car, Karen." She shook her head. "Not until you agree to meet with the board and discuss your behavior." "My behavior?" I barked a laugh. "You're the one trespassing, harassing, and committing fraud." She leaned out the window, lowering her sunglasses. "Prove it." I raised my phone. "Already have." Her smirk faltered for just a second. Then she gunned the engine, peeled out of my driveway, and sped off. Gravel sprayed across my lawn. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding. It was official. Karen had declared all-out war. But here's the thing about bullies, they always push too far. And Karen? She was about to make the one mistake that would finally end her reign of terror. By this point, Karen had crossed every line imaginable: fake citations, smear campaigns, even blocking my driveway with her car. But all of that was nothing compared to what she did next. Because this time, she didn't just target me. She dragged the county itself into her little war. And that was the mistake that would finally unravel everything. It started on a Thursday morning. I was sipping coffee on my porch when I noticed a county utility truck pulling up at the end of my driveway. Two workers in hard hats got out, unfurled a set of blueprints, and started marking lines on the ground with bright orange spray paint. I walked down to greet them. "Hey guys, what's going on?" One of them glanced at me, then back at his plans. "We got a work order here. Says we're supposed to inspect and relocate your water connection. Looks like the HOA requested it." I blinked. "The HO? They don't own my water line. That's county property connected to my private well system." The worker shrugged. "All I know is the request came through official channels. Signed off by HOA Compliance Office. There it was again, that fake department Karen had invented. But this time, she'd used it to file a formal request with the county. She hadn't just forged a letter to scare me. She'd impersonated a government entity. "Gentlemen," I said carefully, "before you touch a thing, you need to know this request is fraudulent. I'll get my lawyer on the phone right now." The workers exchanged uneasy looks. One of them said, "If that's true, we need to file a report." "We can't act on bogus orders," I nodded. "Exactly. Please do." They packed up their gear and drove off, but not before giving me copies of the paperwork they'd received. And there, in black and white, was Karen's signature. She'd literally signed her name under the title Director, HOA Compliance Office. I emailed everything to Mark within minutes. His response came back almost instantly. "This is criminal." "Not civil, criminal. She's impersonating officials. Keep every shred of evidence. We're going to the county prosecutor." That afternoon, the county inspector himself showed up at my place. He was a tall man with graying hair, clipboard tucked under his arm. "We've been getting a lot of complaints about your property," he said, scanning my yard. "But frankly, it's one of the cleanest lots I've seen." I handed him the fake work order. "You might want to take a look at this." His eyes narrowed as he read. "This is a felony. Whoever filed this could be looking at serious charges." I didn't have to say her name. We both knew exactly who it was. The inspector promised to escalate it immediately. And just like that, Karen's little game stopped being a neighborhood feud and became a legal matter. But Karen still had no idea her world was about to collapse. She kept doubling down, strutting through the neighborhood like she was untouchable. She even bragged at the local park that she had special contacts in the county working with her to take me down. The neighbors weren't buying it anymore. Ever since the failed vote, her credibility had been slipping. People who used to nod along now avoided her entirely. Others whispered about how unhinged she'd become. The flyers she'd handed out were still scattered around, but now they were treated like a joke. One evening, I overheard two neighbors talking on the sidewalk. "Did you hear what she tried with the county?" One asked. "Yeah," the other said. "If that's true, she's in real trouble. I don't want to be anywhere near that mess." By the weekend, even her loyal supporters were bailing on her. At the next HOA meeting, attendance was the lowest anyone could remember. Karen still marched in, chin high, clipboard in hand, but the room was half empty. The board members barely looked at her dot. She tried to rally them anyway. "This neighborhood is falling apart because people aren't respecting authority," she shouted. "We need stronger rules, tighter enforcement, harsher penalties." Robert, the board chair, cut her off. "Karen, enough. We're not here to give you power trips. We're here to mow lawns, maintain the pool, and keep the streetlights working. That's it. Whatever crusade you're on your own." The silence afterward was deafening. Karen sputtered, then stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I thought that would be the end. But Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. The very next day, I woke up to see a brand new sign staked into the ground right outside my property line. Notice: this area under HOA jurisdiction. Trespassers will be fined. The sign had no legal standing, of course, but it was bold, big and designed to intimidate. Neighbors walking their dogs slowed down, reading it with wide eyes. Some shook their heads, others laughed. But I wasn't laughing, because this wasn't just harassment anymore. This was fraud, intimidation, and impersonation of government authority. Mark called me later that night. His voice was firm, almost excited. "She's done. I've already forwarded everything to the county prosecutor's office. They're investigating her for fraud and forgery. It's only a matter of time before she faces real consequences." I leaned back in my chair, finally letting the tension ease a little. For weeks, Karen had pushed and pushed, thinking she could intimidate me into submission. But she'd finally overplayed her hand. The war wasn't over, but the balance had shifted. For the first time, it wasn't me on defense, it was Karen. And soon, everyone in the neighborhood would see her for what she really was. The morning the county officials showed up at Karen's door was the morning the entire neighborhood changed. I was out front trimming my hedges when I noticed two county vehicles pull into the subdivision, one from the prosecutor's office, the other from the Department of Public Works. They parked right in front of Karen's immaculate lawn, the kind she bragged about at every meeting. Within minutes, 3 officials were knocking on her door. Karen stepped outside in her usual queen of the neighborhood get-up pressed blouse, oversized sunglasses, and a permanent scowl. But when she saw the badges, I swear she lost 2 shades of color right there on the porch. I couldn't hear everything from where I stood, but I caught fragments. Forgery of government documents, impersonation of public officials, filing fraudulent work orders. Karen's voice shot back sharp and panicked. "This is harassment. I'm protecting my community. You don't understand, I had authority." One of the officials shook his head. "Ma'am, you had no such authority. You willfully misrepresented yourself as a county official." "That's a crime," her voice cracked. But I'm the HOA president." The official's reply was ice cold. "That doesn't make you the government." By now, neighbors had gathered on the sidewalks. Some whispered, others outright smirked. A few pulled out their phones. For the first time, Karen's iron grip on the community was breaking in plain sight. The officials handed her a packet of document summonses, notices, who knows what else, and she practically slammed the door in their faces. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen it. Karen wasn't the untouchable ruler anymore. She was just another neighbor under investigation. That afternoon, I got a call from Mark, my attorney. "They've opened a full investigation," he said. "She's facing multiple counts of fraud, and they're digging into whether HOA funds were misused for her little crusades. If they find money missing, it won't just be fines. It could mean jail." I almost dropped the phone. Jail? Absolutely. HOAs have strict financial reporting requirements. If she used dues for her fake flyers, those fake notices, or that fence crew, she's toast. And between us, I think she did. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. For weeks, I'd been the one under siege, harassed, threatened, smeared. But now, Karen was the one drowning in red tape. Of course, Karen wasn't going down without a fight. That evening, she called an emergency neighborhood meeting in the park. She dragged out a megaphone, set up a folding table with stacks of papers, and tried to rally whoever would listen. "This is a witch hunt," she screamed through the megaphone. "The county is corrupt. They're targeting me because I dared to stand up for this neighborhood." Her voice echoed across the park, but only a handful of people showed up. Most of them stood awkwardly at the edges, clearly embarrassed to be there. Even her diehard supporters looked uncomfortable. One neighbor shouted back, "Karen, you forged documents. That's not standing up for us. That's breaking the law." Another chimed in, "You made us all look like fools." Karen's face twisted with rage. "Lies, all lies." I did everything for this community. Without me, you'd all be living in chaos. I couldn't resist. I stepped forward, phone recording. Karen, the only chaos around here is you. And the county knows it. You're finished. She pointed the megaphone at me like it was a weapon. You're the reason this is happening. You poisoned everyone against me. But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. They'd seen the officials at her door. They'd seen the fake signs, the fake notices, the screaming meltdowns. The tide had turned. The next few days were a slow-motion collapse. The board called a special meeting, not to back her, but to remove her. The room was packed this time, standing room only. Robert, the chair, didn't even bother hiding his disgust. Karen, he said, you've abused your position, misrepresented this HOA, and exposed us to serious legal risk. Effective immediately, you are removed as president. The vote was unanimous. Even Sheila, who had once been bullied into silence, raised her hand without hesitation. Karen erupted, of course shouting, threatening lawsuits, promising revenge. But her words had no power anymore. The board escorted her out, and the room erupted in applause. I just sat there, stunned. Weeks of stress, harassment, and fights, and now, just like that, she was gone. But the county investigation didn't stop with her removal. Word spread that auditors were combing through every HOA expense, every receipt, every budget line from the past 3 years. Neighbors whispered about missing funds and unauthorized charges. One rumor said Karen had used HOA money to pay for landscaping in her own yard. Another claimed she billed the community for security patrols that never existed. Every new revelation chipped away at what little reputation she had left. I'd see her sometimes, skulking around the neighborhood in sweatpants and a baseball cap, avoiding eye contact. The woman who once barked orders and strutted like a queen was now a pariah. People crossed the street to avoid her. Kids whispered about her like she was a ghost story. And me? For the first time in months, I could breathe. My driveway was clear. My mailbox was empty of fake flyers. The county inspectors stopped showing up. Peace was finally creeping back in, but deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her don't just vanish quietly. They plot, they simmer, they wait for one last shot, and part of me wondered, what would Karen's final move be? I thought it was over. After the county showed up, after the board voted her out, after the neighbors finally saw through her games, I really believed Karen's reign was finished. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to fade into the background quietly. No, she had one last play, and it was the most desperate one yet. It started with a letter. Not the official kind with county seals or certified envelopes. This one was handwritten. Messy and shoved under my door in the middle of the night. It read, "You think you've won, but you don't understand what I've built. This neighborhood needs me, and you'll regret tearing me down. You'll see." No signature, but it didn't need one. The handwriting, the tone, it screamed Karen. I laughed at first, but the truth is, it rattled me. After months of battles, the thought of Karen sneaking around at night, still plotting, made my skin crawl. A few days later, she tried staging a comeback. She set up a folding table outside the subdivision entrance, right where her fake checkpoint had once been. She taped handwritten signs to the table that said, HOA Rebuild Fund and Save Our Community. She was literally trying to collect cash from anyone willing to stop. But here's the kicker. Nobody stopped. Cars rolled past. Joggers ignored her. One guy even shouted, "Go home, Karen." As he ran by, I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, almost in disbelief. The same woman who once bullied the entire neighborhood into silence was now reduced to begging on the curb. Ignored by everyone. The final straw came a week later. Karen filed a lawsuit. Not against me, not against the board, but against the county. She claimed the officials had violated her constitutional rights by removing her as HOA president. It was laughable, but she was dead serious. She strutted around the neighborhood waving copies of her complaint like it was her ticket back to power. But within weeks, the court dismissed it. The judge's words were brutal. The plaintiff had no lawful authority to impersonate county officials or to misuse HOA funds. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Translation: Karen's crusade was officially dead. No appeals. No comebacks. The day the dismissal notice arrived, neighbors gathered in the cul-de-sac. For the first time in months, the air felt light again. Kids rode bikes without being chased off. People laughed, shared drinks, and swapped stories about Karen's downfall. Someone even brought a cake that read, HOA Freedom Day. I'll admit it. I took a slice with the biggest grin on my face. Karen, meanwhile, disappeared. Her house went up for sale within the month. Some say she moved out of state. Others whisper she's plotting to worm her way into another HOA somewhere else. As for me, my land is my land again. No fake checkpoints. No forged flyers. No late-night threats. Just peace. Looking back, I realize Karen's downfall wasn't just about me standing my ground. It was about a whole community finally waking up, refusing to be controlled, and choosing freedom over fear. And that, my friends, is how the nightmare ended. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that HOA drama never truly disappears. For every Karen that leaves, another one seems to pop up somewhere else, ready to stir chaos, make demands, and push boundaries they don't even have. And that's why I share these stories. Because sometimes, the wildest battles don't happen in courtrooms or on battlefields. They happen right in our own neighborhoods. If you've been hooked by this saga, trust me, there are even crazier HOA stories out there. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to listen HOA stories, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next jaw-dropping showdown. Do you have your own HOA nightmare? Drop it in the comments. I might feature your story in an upcoming episode. Thanks for watching Listen HOA Stories, where the truth about HOAs is always stranger than fiction.